Hey folks, tonight we're stepping into something a little darker. A time of plagues, punishments, and pottage. Welcome to the Middle Ages, and trust me, it's not what the movies told you. Forget the knights in shining armor and fair maidens. Real medieval life? You probably wouldn't last a single day. So before we start, hit that like button only if you genuinely enjoy this kind of deep dive. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? I always love seeing this little global midnight community we've got going. Now, turn down your lights, grab a blanket, and let's travel back to the year 1325. Good news? You're alive. Bad news? So are the fleas. Your bed is a half-rotten straw mattress stuffed with bugs and hay that smells like a barn floor, because it was a barn floor, about 3 months ago. No memory foam, no pillows, no fresh sheets, just a wool blanket that hasn't been washed since last winter, and now weighs about as much as a small cow from all the grime. You blink awake to the sound of a church bell, the medieval version of an alarm clock, only louder and meaner. Your house? A single wooden hut with one room, no windows, and a cozy open floor plan that includes your family, your goat, and whatever insects decided to move in last night. The smell? A rich, layered symphony of human sweat, stale ale, goat, and something that might be mold, but you stopped asking questions months ago. You stretch, instantly regret it. Your spine cracks like an old door hinge. Your knees sound like a bag of gravel being shaken by a disappointed peasant. You're 22 years old, which, congratulations, is basically middle-aged, and it's only morning. Time to start your day. You step onto the floor, which is either wet from last night's rain dripping through the thatch roof or crusty from something the neighbor's chicken did. Either way, your feet are part of nature now. Privacy? Never heard of it. Your parents, siblings, a random cousin, and a couple of lice colonies, all right there with you. No walls, no me time, just community. And tetanus. All right, nature's calling, and it's not leaving a voicemail. You go outside. There's no toilet, no seat, no paper, no flush, not even a passive-aggressive plunger in the corner. For peasants, the bathroom is a wooden bucket behind the house, already full because Uncle Wolfstan had a bad turnip night. The smell? Biblical. You do your business, hold your breath, and then toss it out into the street. And yes, that's the same street everyone walks on. You're supposed to yell, "Gardez l'eau," Old French for "watch out below," but honestly, nobody ever moves fast enough. The streets are open sewers, a beautiful, flowing river of human waste, animal droppings, and mystery fluids best left unidentified. If you're lucky enough to live in a town with public latrines, congrats! You get to sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers in a medieval group chat for your butt. No doors, no ventilation, just vibes. And cholera. Toilet paper? Not a thing. Most people use straw, moss, rags, or if they're feeling fancy, a scrap of wool. Some people, well, let's just say they improvise, which is probably why handshakes weren't really big back then. But surely it's better in a castle, you say. Sort of. You might get a garde-robe, a hole in the wall that drops your waist straight into the moat. Genius idea, right? Except your enemies know that. And yes, attackers sometimes climbed in through the waist chute. Talk about coming in through the back door. And that's just the start of your medieval morning. Breakfast? Hope you like yesterday's pottage, because that's also today's lunch and dinner. But we'll save that delightful menu for part 2. If you enjoyed this dive into the grimy side of history, give it a like, share it with someone who thinks they could survive the Middle Ages, and I'll see you in the next century. Welcome back, brave traveler. If you survived waking up in the Middle Ages last time, congratulations. You've officially beaten level 1 of medieval misery. But don't celebrate just yet. Because today, we're talking about food, work, and, well, everything that made staying alive even harder. Let's start with breakfast. Remember how I said last night's pottage is also today's lunch? Yeah, I wasn't joking. Pottage is basically a thick stew of whatever you can find. Barley, peas, turnips, maybe a tiny piece of bacon if you're having a good week. It's been simmering for days, constantly topped up with water and scraps. So, congratulations, you're technically eating history. No sugar, no coffee, no donuts. Your caffeine fix? Cold beer. Yes, even kids drank it, not because they were rebels, but because the water could literally kill you. Medieval rivers were like soup, a chunky mix of dirt, animal waste, and occasionally, a floating surprise. If you're lucky enough to be a noble, things look better. Bread, roasted meat, imported wine. But don't get too jealous. Rich people's food often came with its own curses. Meat was barely cooked, fruit was a luxury, and half the spices were so expensive you could trade them for a cow. Also, the kitchen hygiene, let's just say, the rats ate for free. Now let's talk about work, because no one in the 14th century was living their best life. If you're a peasant, your entire existence is farming someone else's land. You wake up before sunrise, work till it sets, and get paid in the right to not starve. Rain? You work. Snow? You work. Plague? You still work unless you're already dead. Tools were primitive, your back hurts by age 12, and your hands look like you fought 3 dragons bare-handed. There's no weekend, no vacation, no mental health day. Your boss is basically the local lord, and his HR department, the church. Speaking of the church, let's just say religion was the Wi-Fi of medieval life. Always on, mostly invisible, and if you broke the rules, you lost connection fast. People prayed for everything: good crops, fewer diseases, and maybe that their neighbor's cow would stop pooping on their doorstep. And if something went wrong, it wasn't germs or bacteria, it was God's punishment. Which brings us to health, or whatever counted as health back then. Doctors believed sickness came from bad air, or your body's humors being unbalanced. So their cure? They bled you until you nearly passed out. Got a fever? Leeches. Broken bone? Tight bandage and a prayer. Toothache? Oh, easy. They just rip it out with pliers heated in a fire. No anesthesia, no antibiotics. Just pain, and maybe a choir singing outside. And when you did die, which was likely before age 35, your family didn't even get a proper funeral half the time. The Black Death alone wiped out almost half of Europe. Imagine entire towns turning silent overnight. No one to bury the dead. Mass graves, burning candles, the air heavy with fear. For people living through it, the apocalypse wasn't a movie, it was Tuesday. Still, somehow, people kept living. Laughing, loving, raising kids. Telling stories by firelight, dreaming about a better tomorrow. And maybe that's the most human thing about the Middle Ages. They didn't have comfort or safety, but they had hope. So next time you complain about slow Wi-Fi or a bad cup of coffee, just remember, at least you're not brushing your teeth with ashes and praying your soup doesn't give you dysentery. If you made it this far, hit that like button and comment, "I survived the Middle Ages." I'll know you're one of the brave ones. Thanks for watching. and I'll see you in Part 3, How People Actually Fell in Love in the Middle Ages. Welcome back, time traveler. You've survived the fleas, the food, the filth, and somehow you're still standing in the Middle Ages. So what's next? Love, romance, passion. Yeah, medieval style. Spoiler, it's a lot less Romeo and Juliet and a lot more Game of Thrones without the budget. Let's start with dating, or rather, the complete absence of it. There were no apps, no DMs, no casual, "Hey, you up?" at midnight. If you were a peasant, your future partner was basically whoever lived within walking distance. You didn't fall in love, you fell into arrangements. Most marriages were business deals. Your parents, or sometimes your lord, decided who you'd marry. Love came after marriage, if you were lucky. If not, well, you just farmed next to someone you mildly tolerated for the next 20 years. Nobles had it worse, because their marriages were about power, land, and alliances. Imagine your wedding day being less happily ever after and more political merger with extra paperwork. But hey, at least there was a feast. And if you didn't die of food poisoning during it, that counted as romance. Now, let's talk about the rules of love. Back then, the church had opinions on everything. And I mean everything. Kissing in public? Sinful. Holding hands? Risky. Premarital? Anything? Straight to hell. Do not pass go. Do not collect indulgences. So people got creative. They'd exchange secret tokens, a ribbon, a lock of hair, or in rare cases, an entire poem written by candlelight. Medieval sliding into DMs. But here's the twist. There was a kind of romantic fantasy floating around called courtly love. Picture this: a knight writing love songs for a noble lady he can never have. He worships her from afar, fights battles in her name, and then goes home to his actual wife who's milking the goat. It was idealized, poetic, and completely disconnected from reality. Basically, medieval fan fiction. For regular folks, love was simpler and much messier. You met someone at the village market, traded a few smiles while buying onions, and before you knew it, boom, engagement. There were no long dating phases, no candlelight dinners. Marriage happened young, sometimes at 14. And life expectancy being what it was, you were halfway to retirement by 25 anyway. Weddings themselves, huge community events. Everyone came. The family, the priest, the neighbors, probably the chickens too. There was dancing, bad singing, and enough mead to make everyone forget how cold it was. Romantic? Maybe not. But real? Absolutely. Inside marriage, gender roles were, let's just say, very medieval. The husband worked the fields. The wife ran the household, raised the kids, made the food, and occasionally helped in the fields too. Divorce? Forget it. You were stuck together until one of you died. And statistically speaking, that didn't take very long. Still, people did fall in love. There are old letters, poems, even songs that show genuine affection between husbands and wives. They laughed, argued, missed each other when apart. Because underneath all the dirt, disease, and church rules, people were still people, wanting connection, comfort, and someone to share the misery with. So no, love in the Middle Ages wasn't glamorous. But it was real. It was built on survival, not selfies, on loyalty, not luxury. And maybe, just maybe, that's what made it stronger. If you enjoyed this journey through medieval romance, give the video a like and comment, "True love survives everything." Next time, we're going even deeper. Part 4, How People Actually Died and Were Remembered in the Middle Ages. Trust me, it's going to be hauntingly fascinating. See you there, traveler, and may your fleas find someone else tonight. Welcome back, traveler. You've survived the filth, the hunger, the heartbreak, and now it's time to face the one thing no one in the Middle Ages could escape: death. And trust me, back then it wasn't quiet, peaceful, or pretty. It was everywhere. In the streets, the fields, even the air you breathed. The average medieval person didn't just know about death. They lived next to it. Babies died in their first year. Parents buried children. Entire villages vanished from one bad harvest or one unlucky rat. It wasn't if you die young, it was when. Let's start with the obvious one: the plague. The Black Death of the 14th century hit like an apocalypse. Imagine waking up to find half your town gone overnight. The sky feels heavy, the bells never stop ringing, and every breath could be your last. People thought it was God's wrath. Priests prayed, doctors panicked, and the smell of burning herbs filled the streets. No one knew it was fleas, tiny, invisible assassins riding on rats, changing the course of human history. But even without plague, the medieval world was full of creative ways to die: infection from a splinter, a fall from a horse, bad water, witch trial gone wrong. Medicine was so bad that sometimes the cure was the killer. Got pneumonia? They'll bleed you until you faint. Got a headache? Drink mercury. Feeling sad? That's probably demons. Time for an exorcism. And then there was war. Not the clean, cinematic kind, but muddy, chaotic, and loud. Swords, arrows, fire, disease. Most soldiers didn't die in battle. They died later, from the wounds. Armor rusted, blood got infected, and the lucky ones? Well, they just lost a limb. Yet, for all the horror, death wasn't just fear. It was also faith. The church ruled the final frontier, teaching that every life was just a test before eternity. If you were good, you went to heaven. If not, well, there was hell. And in between, a medieval waiting room called purgatory, where souls were basically on hold, waiting for enough prayers to get upgraded. That's why funerals mattered so much. The moment you died, bells rang through the village. Neighbors stopped what they were doing. Candles were lit, prayers whispered, and the body was washed by hand, because death was sacred. Even peasants got their version of respect: a wooden coffin, a shallow grave, and maybe a few flowers if someone cared enough. But the rich, oh, they went all out. Tombs, marble, sculptures, because nothing says holy soul like gold leaf and 16 candles. Some nobles even had their hearts buried separately, believing that it would bring them closer to God, or maybe they just liked attention. Of course, not everyone stayed dead, at least not in the medieval imagination. Ghost stories were everywhere. People believed the dead could come back, to warn, to haunt, or to finish what they started. You didn't walk alone at night, because the wind might carry voices. Footsteps might echo where no one stood. And if you saw a pale figure in the fog, you prayed first and ran second. Yet somehow, through all the fear and superstition, there was beauty in how they faced it. They built cathedrals that touched the sky. They painted angels on ceilings they'd never lived to finish. They sang hymns about hope, because when death is that close, you either give up or you start believing in something bigger. So the next time you light a candle, remember, for a medieval soul, that single flame meant everything. It was warmth, it was prayer, It was the promise that even in the darkest time, the light would come back. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You've officially survived life and death in the Middle Ages. Hit that like button and comment, "I made it to the afterlife." Because next time, we're doing something special. Part 5. The Afterlife. Heaven, Hell, and everything in between. And trust me, you don't want to miss that one.
Welcome back, traveler. You've lived through the dirt, the disease, the heartbreak, and the horror. And now, at last, your medieval journey ends. Not in this world, but in the next. This is the afterlife, the final chapter of life in the Middle Ages. To a medieval mind, death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far greater, or far worse. Heaven, hell, and that mysterious in-between, purgatory. These weren't just ideas, they were destinations. And everyone, from the poorest farmer to the richest king, believed their soul was constantly being judged. Heaven was the dream. Golden light, angels singing, and finally peace after a lifetime of pain. But it wasn't easy to get there. You had to live right, pray constantly, confess everything, and hope the church liked you enough to say a few extra prayers after you were gone. Because in the Middle Ages, prayers were like currency, and salvation wasn't free. Then came hell, a place painted in every church wall, full of fire, monsters, and eternal screaming. To people back then, hell wasn't a metaphor. It was real. The kind of real that made grown men cry during sermons and made children swear never to skip confession again. The devil wasn't hiding in shadows. He was right there in the paintings, waiting for sinners with a smile. And then there was purgatory. Think of it as heaven's waiting room, a smoky, endless space where souls served their time burning away their sins before they could enter paradise. Families prayed for their dead, paid the church for indulgences, and believed that every candle, every whispered name brought their loved ones a little closer to heaven. It was equal parts hope and fear. But here's the thing. Even with all that fear of hell, people still dreamed. They still hoped. They still believed that love, kindness, and courage could save a soul. Because deep down, even in the darkest age, humanity refused to let go of light. And that's what this whole journey has been about, isn't it? Not just fleas, filth, or famine, but the raw, unfiltered human spirit that somehow endured through it all. The laughter shared beside a fire, the prayer whispered in fear, the song sung during a funeral, the belief that tomorrow, somehow, would be better. That's what made the Middle Ages more than just